It's Jen Suzuki, and I'm in the industry. I meet some of the greatest leaders out there, dealer execs, dealers, GMs, and I'm bringing them in the studio to talk to me about what's making their business pop, what's accelerating their growth. I'm sharing my own personal strategies for your sales teams, so I'm ready to get after it. Are you? Welcome back, listeners. It's Dealer Talk with Jen Suzuki podcast, and I'm pumped. You don't know how long it has been for me to get somebody from Tekion to talk to me and share this enormous growth and this thing that people are always trying to figure out. What is it? And gosh, Tekion has really emerged. I mean, I think they've got over 1,000 clients. I don't know. Sometimes you read the things, they're not always right, but I have got a VP of analytics, partner success. This is a car guy, okay? Grew up same part of the country as me, has worked his way up through the dealerships, and really is a dealer advocate. And I'm very excited. Also a lover of training. So hello. I was like, we're gonna be gelling. I can't wait to hear. Pedram's here. Pedram Faed, please welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jen, and thanks for that awesome introduction. Super excited to get into it and share all the fun and exciting things we're doing here at Tekion.
Okay, I can't wait. So you guys came on the scene. We've been watching this thing grow. Some skeptics out there, still some skeptics out there. I'd like to squash some of that, and I like to see open minds out there. People like willing to see new technology. Always wanted to become more efficient and grow businesses. We got to know what's out there. I have to ask you, Tekion. What is this? What is this word? Where does this word come from?
I know, it's super funny, right? And I'm glad you asked that question, because that was one of the very first questions I asked Jay. Jay Vajen's CEO of our company, and as I got to meet with him, and shoot, this is going back now 2019. And when I met him and I started having conversations with him, I asked him, I said, what is Tekion? And he told me, and he said, well, Tekion is a hypothetical particle of light, subatomic particle of light that's faster than the speed of light. And I was like, wow, what a name. Like, why did you choose that name? Like, why do you want to be faster, hypothetically faster than the speed of light? And he walked me through this story about that, for example, in his days at Tesla, when he was tasked with building the DMS at Tesla with Elon. He got really crazy timelines that he had to achieve the timeline in a specific time, which he thought was like not doable. And the terminology that they used at that time was called warp. And he was like, I need you to go warp speed, right? Like the reference to Star Wars. And so he just felt that he's like, I want to know what's faster than warp speed. What's faster than the speed of light? And from a heritage perspective, you couldn't have now at that time I thought, well, what a cool, I guess, scientific way to name your company. But he probably couldn't have picked a better name, because here we are 5 years later, and I'm sure everybody could appreciate, not only having to certify with every OEM, building not just the DMS, but all the ancillary products, and doing it all within about a 4.5, 5 year span. I don't know what other better word you could have came up with, right? Like, so it worked out phenomenally.
The speed of light.
The speed of light. So it's great. But it's Tekion is like, if you were going to be, I guess, but they looked at it, they were like, well, we can't call it Tekion because we don't think that really it doesn't ring well. But the heritage of it, and so they're like, ooh, Tekion. So that definitely makes sense. But the heritage, I guess the scientific word is tachyon, but it's the reference to a subatomic particle that is hypothetical, and it's faster than the speed of light. But crazy.
I have to write that one down. I want to know how long did it take you to remember that.
I know. I have to always keep that in the back of my mind, like dusting that off occasionally, but that's what it is.
Do people ask you that?
Oh yeah, no, we get that.
They do.
We get that occasionally. So yeah, it's a good question.
Well, I can see the parallels in your explanation as to rooting back what the company stands for and what it's trying to accomplish. And I can see some of the vision now a little bit more clearly. And it's totally making sense because you guys got some years under your belt now. And many of us have watched you guys do a lot of outside of the box thinking, acquiring dealerships to actually install and learn from a dealership that you are operating. This is amazing stuff. I mean, there's no better lab than that.
Yep. Yeah, no, we thought that was a really good way. Early on, of course, we were very fortunate. We had a lot of dealers that local to us that said, "Hey, we're willing to participate. Like, we want to make this better."
Mm-hmm.
And but you can only get so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
With like letting somebody kind of experiment in that kind of an environment. And it was really just sheer dumb luck that we had this amazing opportunity. Funny story, probably not then, but
Mm-hmm.
right after we, when we were going through the very first decision of making Gilroy Buick GMC was
Mm-hmm.
that dealership. When we bought that store, it literally happened. So 3 months later, COVID hit, and so we were
Uh-huh.
like, "Holy smokes,
Ah.
maybe this wasn't a really good idea." But in turn,
Mm.
it turned out to be an incredible idea.
Mm.
We were very successful with that operation for many folds, right? So we went from joking that when we were building the product, right, like, and get all these people on the plane, and they were like, "Hey, is this like supposed to happen? Like the landing gear is not working or something." So then later we're like, "Oh, it's much easier if we just buy the plane, right?" Like,
Yeah.
so
We'll just figure it
we
out
bought the
ourselves.
plane. But it was a phenomenal place that really enabled us, to your point, like a proving ground, a test track that really
Mm-hmm.
we could take ideas that we had and then be able to deploy them in the real world and have real users, right? Not like,
Mm-hmm.
a test environment, but a real environment with real technicians and real sales consultants to just give you feedback. And it was the best thing in the world. And we were
Oh, I
fortunate
bet.
to have a great partner. And so, yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah, and I imagine too, because a lot of times when people take on a big initiative like this, like change DMS systems, that is
Hmm.
a major undertaking. I mean, that is
Yeah,
no, that's a scary thought, you know?
totally.
I
Yeah,
mean, and I've seen a lot of integrations, and it doesn't happen overnight. Like this is a thing, that's going
yeah,
to take a little bit of time, and then people are going to be impacted, and people are going to have to change, and people are going to have to they're gonna have to work through some kinks, and then they're gonna have to celebrate those successes and remember those successes exist. And
yep,
and and sometimes I'm sure it's cloudy too, because a lot of things are happening. And I imagine when you have your own store too, and you're able to see this thing get executed, it's very different to be on that dealership side and to
yep.
be able to relate to everyone's role that's impacted on making such an extraordinary change.
No, 100%. And I think there's a lot of things that we've learned. I was just like I share this. I have this like talk track in a sense. I tell everyone, look, at the end of the day, the concept sells really well, right? Tekion sells well. It certainly
Yes.
it does implement hard. And
Hmm.
but I think that from speaking from dealer to dealer, and I was sharing with you, I'm through and through car business. I love the car business, and to me, the opportunity at Tekion was really to contribute in a meaningful way from a
Mm-hmm.
technology perspective. And when we speak to dealers, and we've learned a lot over the last 5 years, the change management really at the end of the day, you have to want to actually create the change. And I'm sure you've seen this in your experience. The famous golden triangle is essentially like technology, people, and process.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally watch dealers spend tons of money just thinking, hey, if we buy more technology, it'll suddenly fix the people and process. And it doesn't, right?
No.
And so we've become better partners with our dealers to really also try to understand what their people and process looks like so that
Mhm.
when we make the technology, we're more successful. Because early on, I think the challenge was really trying to understand, well, here's the technology, good luck. And
Mm.
that didn't really bode well. So,
Mhm.
but it's constant learning.
Mhm. Some of the early setbacks that have become pivotal in your successes today.
Yep.
Can you recall some of these things that really stood out to you that looked like a volcano in the midst of it, yet now looking back, you're like, I'm glad that happened because now it transformed the way we think or how we build software or how we launch this into our clients' businesses.
Sure.
What are the things that stand out?
Yeah, I mean, probably the big one, which I think was transformational for everybody, is look, when COVID hit, we all had to figure out how to do business differently, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And so I still remember vividly when like the country got shut down and everyone was like, well, what do we do? How do we sell cars, in
mhm,
a contactless environment? And, kudos to this team. One of the first things we did, we said, well, why don't we figure out how to build a product that services and that handles both service and sales contactless, business models.
mhm,
And we did that. And one of the
mhm,
things that became really cool to just watch it actually come to life was, of course, we were at the center of, look, digital retailing had been out for a
Right.
decade, right?
Nobody
But
used it.
nobody used it. It was just lead gen 2.0. I used to call
Right.
it daily price 2.0. And so that didn't really solve the problem. And so what we said, we were like, hey, at the end of the day, all car dealers want to do is to be able to still like do the old share the screen, right? Like, hey, Jen, you're
Yes.
sitting at home, instead of you sitting inside the showroom and me sharing the screen, why don't I do the deal and we'll desk the deal and I'll share the screen with you. You can upload information to me. And so we started to really latch onto this kind of assisted idea of helping people. And it was incredible. So, and then a bunch of dealers latched onto it. And on the service side, because this concept already existed in sales, like this model of some sort of like, contactless sales. And then, but service was really amazing. And again, I think some things that really paid dividends for us was, you never see a DMS be built from the mobile ground up. It's always like desktop platform because we're all accustomed to sitting in front of our desktop.
Yep.
And one of the key advantages was we built from mobile forward. We said, hey, the future DMS has got to probably be around mobile because every single one of us has a cell phone in our hands. And so what was really cool is the fact that you can write and, operate a repair order on a mobile device, like totally unhinged from the DMS. And where I'm going with that, it's not as like a shameless plug by any means, but it's more about the capability that during COVID, people like were sending an advisor out to a customer's house.
Yeah.
And they were picking up the car. They were writing the repair order right there in the customer's, or in the customer's, home.
Driveway.
Picked up the car. And so they would like dealerships built these processes. They would tell customers, they'd say, hey, Jen, leave your keys in the car. I'm going to be there in 10 minutes out. And when I get there, I'm going to do the walk around of the car. I'm going to take photos, pictures, et cetera, and send it over to you. You sign it. I'll take the car. It just was really incredible, Jen, because it was the beginning of us seeing that a lot of these ideas really started to come to life off of such a crazy event. That was probably one of the most impactful that I watched.
Yeah, and I'm guessing there's a lot more challenges that continue to arise, and certainly trying to continue to tackle them is evolving a product. Take me back a little bit though. I'm thinking about. So there was a time where I met Jay before Tekion was a thing, and he was just poking around, trying to figure some stuff out. He had an NDA, talking to dealers, and really trying to investigate problems, to develop this revolutionary product. And it's neat to see what's come of at this point. But I'm wondering what the biggest problems were that inspired this product. And it's so different than the DMS systems that we've seen for decades, being as it's built on the cloud. But maybe you can share a little of that with me. Like, what were the problems that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, and I think everybody can empathize with this, is that, two things. One, I think fragmentation in just the retail ecospace, right? So when you think about, and he had friends in the business at the time he was speaking to, these were folks who were car dealers, and they were telling him, they said, hey, look, it took like 10 or 12 different softwares to run my dealership. And he was like, that's odd. Like, why does it take 10 or 12? And so that was one bag of worms. And then the other one was, he's like, then on top of that, if you get these 10 or 12 things to work with each other, then the OEM has its own set of like data and portals and things that you have to use. And then they're completely disconnected from it. And, I think that was also at the cusp of knowing that somewhere in the future, there was going to be some pathway where manufacturers wanted to partner with dealers to figure out how to really, truly do e-commerce. Like they were chasing the Tesla concept. And so at the highest level, he said, why can't there be like a connected ecosystem where the OEM, the dealer, and the customer all can participate in one platform that is not broken and disjointed? And that was it. And he personally had some experiences of buying a car. He's got this famous story himself where he was buying a BMW. And he's like, wow, why is this so friction led? Why can't I buy this, with a lot more simplicity and ease? And, the more he double clicked, the more he asked questions, what it led to was, yeah, our tech stack's not built for it. A lot of the stuff that he looked at, he could tell was that it was dated, and it was, and I think the root of the problem was, again, looking at it at the two different kind of lenses was, one, you had an OEM issue, and then you had also the retailer issues, and then the fragmentation of the retailer issues created an issue for that OEM side. So I think the epicenter, the value of Tekion really is that when the OEM and the dealer kind of comes together, and ultimately their customer is their customers together, right? And so for you or me, whatever brand that we carry, we don't ever want to know that, like, oh, how come my brand and the dealer network are not aligned? That's very odd. And I can't tell you how many times we've personally probably experienced that, right? So we really think that bringing that platform of a true ecosystem where they work together is really the right way.
Help me understand it a little bit better. So I'm a customer. How does it impact me? And how does it impact my experience to
Sure.
have such uniformity amongst the trifecta?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, one, we've got an outstanding partnership, for example, with General Motors, and GM really kind of took the leap of faith and said, yeah, hey, like, we have a set of car lines that we want to probably test this idea with and see, how does this work? That if we have customers who are accustomed to maybe on the EV side of the world, who have purchased a Tesla online and felt that it was extremely seamless, how do we replicate that? Because the closest thing to that was, for example, you take a DR tool, and the customer would have to find the dealer. You wouldn't see it at the tier 1 level, right? From, like, if you went to generalmotors.com. And so that became a really cool validation point for us, because, we're proud to say today we power that with General Motors, right? And you go on to gm.com and, you look at their EV vehicles, and there's a specific car you wish to purchase. As you begin that transaction process, what's amazing is, traditionally, when you get to some gate of, like, okay, this is as far as we can get you, you become a lead, and that lead gets passed over to the dealer. Then the dealer has to rework the deal all over again, right? In their DMS, with different sets of numbers and different expectations. And this is fatigue for both the customer and the dealer. Most people think, like, oh, well, dealers, like, but the reality is there's fatigue for the dealer. I mean, you don't want to re-desk the deal all over again. The customer's like, I just did it online.
Did it all online. Would have got erased.
Why is it $467? And you're sitting over here going, well, the taxes don't really add up. So that begins it reinforces the trust issues that consumers have. So just that example of being able to take a transaction from start to finish. And what's amazing, what I didn't finish maybe, is that in the Tekion world, you literally pick that deal up and you start it directly in the DMS exactly from where the customer was. That's incredible, right? Like, that's the efficiency I think that everybody wants. We've proven that no one is trying to take dealership models out. What they really want is to take the 6 to 8 hours of, like, crazy chaos of trying to land on numbers out, and they want to spend more time at a dealership, like, getting ethered about, like, driving the car, right? I still believe, look, the feel of the wheel makes the deal, right? Like, that stuck with me forever. And people, that's how they get emotionally attached to cars and want to drive them. But what they don't get emotionally attached to is spending 6.5 hours going back and forth with somebody. So, but I hope that gives you some perspective of, like, that example. And we have many other OEM partners who really see that to be a win-win, both for their dealers and for their customers, because they're like, oh, this is incredible. Like, this is a value prop. And that was, like, again, kudos to Jay for really being stubborn with the vision, right? But flexible in how he got there. I think that was really amazing to watch, and it's still continuing.
And I'm guessing that you're starting to see, or you're still tackling other issues like that impact the customer experience, which, at the end of the day, we're trying to make it easy for them, so they want to come back and and even service their car. And a lot of times you'll see, like, service and sales against each other. And you've got such an extensive background working in the dealerships, working in dealer education. It's like, we're constantly struggling to get people to be on the same page, and it's one customer, but there's a lot of different touch points, and there's a lot of different tools, and when they don't integrate, it causes, like, so many inefficiencies and compromises the way that we talk to people, the way that we can transact with people. So what are some of the big challenges that you're tackling right now, and how have you already started to make it a little bit more streamlined for the guest?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So for the guests, I think it's the same experience. So like take for example on the service side, right? We
Mm.
find that for service, obviously one of the because you have higher level of frequency with service,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And we know that one of the areas that is an important aspect is communication. Like, I drop off my car, I want a very seamless experience of, dropping off
Hmm.
my vehicle. And then from that point, when the vehicle is there, I want a seamless touch of communication. Like, and we find today people more want text messages than they want phone calls,
Agreed.
right? And good luck getting a hold of an advisor in a dealership today anyway. But
Mm.
like bringing the efficiency, I think, of text messages is really cool. The other thing that we think is really neat is the ability to also use technology like NLP, which is more natural language processing. And it really lets us kind of understand the sentiment of text exchanges that are happening back and forth in real time. And this is really fascinating, right? Because
Hmm.
I'm sure you've been there before where it's like you could have done everything right up until your vehicle gets picked up and somebody, maybe made a mistake and put an oil smudge on the door panel. And as a customer, you pick up the car and you're like, hey, what the heck? Like, what's this oil smudge? And the poor porter's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. But like, and it's 5 o'clock, you want to just get the heck up out of there and go home. When you leave, and let's say your feedback is like, hey, I was really disappointed with this experience. The ability to really read that, recognize, and then say, hey, this was a problem for the customer, and then flag it to a
Mm.
manager.
Mm.
Now you're taking a more proactive stance, right? And so when you
Hmm.
touch on things like experience, loyalty, all these things, I think
Hmm.
every one of us has been in a situation where something has failed, but it's the response of how the company like tackles the failure that either
Mm.
attaches us further to that company or draws us away further. And I think these are some very small, like basic things that when you connect the whole system all together, it's very important. And then later, the fact that you knew maybe the sensitivity of that little smudge mark, I don't know,
Mm.
maybe you see it, that's in the note. You'd say, hey, Jen, the last time you were here, I know we kind of goofed things up. We'd like to give you a courtesy car wash, whatever. But to your point, we envision the future is all about experience, right? I think we've
Hmm.
reached a point where prices and things like that have become so commoditized. Cars have
Agreed.
become so commoditized
Hmm.
that experience is going to be the true front and center. And I think you're going to see a difference now where dealers are going to be able to get tangible premium on experience, right?
Yeah.
And it's great because it's authenticated not necessarily by a President's Award flag, but more by a Yelp score, a Google review
Hmm.
score. That's what
Hmm.
you're gonna, as a consumer, that's what you're gonna look at, right? You can't
Yes.
affiliate what a President's Award flag
You don't even
means.
know what that means.
Yeah, you're like, the president was here? You're like, no, 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 it's the President's Award, right?
Yeah, like, what's that have to do with me?
What does that do with me? But I think that what you will affiliate with is like, wow, you know what? This was super seamless and the way you guys communicated with me. So I think what hums and drums around that ecosystem is going to be a big piece.
Mm. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like, and this is why I'm always looking at technologies that can assist frontline, in making their jobs easier so they can free up to, spend more time with people. And if you're going to leverage technology to become more efficient and free up time, let's make more human connections if we can. And if there's technology that can highlight there's a problem before it becomes a problem, let's
Yeah,
do that. If there's technology that can say, hey, this customer left off and they needed this last time they were here, you bring it up,
totally.
next time they come in, all these things that just make that experience with the customer feel like they feel confident in you, they feel like you're a trusted source, they feel welcome, they feel appreciated, all of these things. But a lot of it has to do with efficiency.
Yeah,
So you've watched a lot of things go down in the stores as you guys have launched quite a big operation. It's just it's a giant, switching a DMS,
sure.
and just from a different perspective, especially with your dealer education background and your in dealership leadership roles. Tell me what some of the biggest challenges are for people when it comes to changing a system, and how what do you coach them on? Like, what do you say to leaders and when they're thinking about doing something like this? Because a lot, and again, it's running parallel in my mind of so many other things that happen outside of just software. It's like, if we're 2024 vibes, we need to be open-minded, ready to change and evolve, and getting everybody on board to do stuff like that is like one of the
Sure.
biggest challenges. So how do you guys tackle that, when you've got some interest in something this big?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a tough challenge. It feels like it's constantly changing, right?
Mm.
But I guess if I was to maybe triangulate like a couple of things, I think you asked is, one, how do we partner with dealers in preparing them? Maybe that's
Yeah.
step one, right? And we're very
Well, a lot of
conscious.
times the dealer gets the great idea, but then if you dealer just takes it and throws it out there and everybody's not on board, it's like, what is this?
Oh, for
Hard to
sure.
adopt.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of things, right? I think it's
Mhm.
certainly a big part of it is partnership with the dealer.
Mhm.
We've learned a lot ourselves early on, like I was mentioning to you about the people, process, technology component. We spend a considerable amount of time ahead of time, like evaluating the processes of the dealership. And what
Oh,
we're
okay.
what we're looking at is, can we replicate the process? And
Mm.
when we do early introductions of like this, what is the screens going to look like, and what of our processes going to be different, right?
Mhm.
And when we get, because we always do well with executives, because executives are like, this is great, I can look at this whole
Right.
thing. And they can log into the system anywhere in the world, and so there's a lot of
Mhm.
flexibility for executives. So we present well to them, and of course they know that they're building their business for the next 5 to 10 years. They're trying to future
Mhm.
proof their business. But
Mhm.
now when you connect to kind of frontline employees and you have to kind of like transform the way that they do business,
Yeah.
in many cases, the first step is really being early on involvement, getting some feedback from them. Like, this is some things that you do, and here's how you're going to do it differently, maybe in Tekion. And
Mm.
then when we go through the various stages, and so in some cases, this can start as early as 6 months back, right, before they
Mm.
actually go through. And sometimes it's as short as
Wow.
3 months, right? But what happens is along that journey, as they're getting an introduction of what's happening and they're involved in that, and I think that's probably the biggest coaching technique we give to our dealer body is involve your teams, right? Don't surprise
Yeah.
them. Don't say, hey, I made this
Good
decision and
advice.
we're going to go with it. Get them involved, because in many cases they also highlight some things that maybe they say, how do you handle it? And we go, shoot, you know what, we didn't think of that, right?
Mm.
Because from an executive perspective, you're not asking like, how do you handle parts bin blah 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 questions, or
Yes.
some low level, like level question that you could not understand. So I think
Mhm.
that would be really important. The other one is really helping the teams understand that, look, at the epicenter of this, like we talked about, experience, right?
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever heard a customer go, hey, I was curious, I was shopping around, are you guys like on DMS this or on this DMS? Like, I don't think anybody's ever asked that question, nor do they
Mhm.
care, right? What they're really looking for is an experience, right? And so I
Mm.
think if you put experience at the epicenter,
Mm.
if I was a dealer and say, okay, this is definitely something that I can win at, right? And I have
Mhm.
the opportunity to compete in this, and I know if I do a good job, that's how I'm going to win, right? And
Mhm.
so when you draw the entire vision back to experience for the team, it really helps them, because there's a lot of stuff dealers do that maybe are internally beneficial that are not beneficial to customers. And I think at every year forward, the transparency that consumers have online to evaluate like what that looks like, it really helps. So like selling that vision to your team about, we're doing this for the sake of experience and
Okay.
for all the reasons we talked about, we usually see a big win, because those dealers are very interested in how to uphold, experience. So that would probably be the two biggest ones that I would say it
Mm.
really helps. I, I have a joke internally that I tell everyone. I'm like, we are not the 8-minute abs, right? Please do not think that, like, you're just going to pop in a
Set
DVD and get,
expectations.
yeah, can't just eat like Cheetos and be like, I don't know, bought this 8-minute abs thing that it's supposed to do. It's just like anything else, right? It's going to
Gotta
take
work
blood,
at
sweat,
it.
and tears. You got to
Yeah.
work at it.
Mhm.
But I think if you align with getting your teams involved, and then you set the mission and charter to how is this going to create a better guest experience, there's
Mhm.
so many different, companies that you could probably refer to, whether it's Amazon or Apple or whoever you want
Mhm.
to list. It's the famous work your experience back, from customer back, right? And I think for dealers, we've done too much of, our internal business to customer. And
Mm.
I'm really happy to say, I think Tekion, in my, obviously may seem biased, but I think in my opinion, we have the most balanced approach to customer experience, and yet preserving the important aspects of also maintaining profitability.
Yeah. And it's, it's also the people that are having to use these systems too and making
Sure.
their lives a bit easier and understanding how to do things. A lot of times people buy stuff and then nobody knows how to use it. And then, oh, this is crap. We didn't take the time to set expectations. We didn't take
Yeah.
time to nurture, education on how to use this or even evaluate what they were currently doing to see if there's some parallels or how we can make it a little bit more streamlined and a little easier to use, easier to
Totally.
to transfer,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, thinking about 2024, what are you guys working on? What's the thing? What's next level?
Oh, yeah. No,
2024.0.
2024.0. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's so many things that we're looking at. I mean, look, we do a couple of things that are also kind of unique, Jen, that help steer the ship as far as what we should be doing.
Mm,
And, customer, of course, my primary responsibility is, customer voice, right? And I want to listen to customers. I empathize with them. And so at the end of the day, the things that we're looking at, I'd say a bulk of 24 for us is a combination of really refinement. Like, what have
okay.
we learned over the last couple of years that our dealers are asking for?
Mm,
And I'm sure you can appreciate, and so could the audience, is that, the reality is there's 16,000 dealers out there plus, or 16.5 plus. And what we're agnostic of brand, everybody agrees there's new, used service parts, right?
mhm,
And body, I guess, if you have a body shop. But at the highest level, everybody's got that. And everyone will agree that that's true. And then the minute we start going kind of down, like, people are like, well, hold on, I sell cars a little bit differently than the other guy or gal across the street. And so that level of complexity, by the fact that every dealer does it a little bit differently, and then every brand has a little bit different, nuance. I'm sure that makes it really challenging in some ways. And so we're really trying to focus in 24 on that refinement era, right? Of like, okay, because when you move at the speed that we've moved at, there's some things that we really need to focus on and listen to our
mhm,
dealers at.
mhm,
And one of the things that I'm, very happy about that we've done a good job is we have a very unique way of drawing feedback from our dealers.
mm,
Most companies usually kind of do quarterly surveys, biannual surveys. We have a system that drives live instant user feedback from our users, and that helps
mm,
us direct the direction of where is the area that needs the most amount of focus. So long-winded, but in 24, I think it's going to be around refinement. We're very excited about CRM. We've got
mm.
some really cool things that we're announcing on CRM, some of which I got to make sure I don't like spill the beans ahead of
Sorry.
NADA here.
Mm,
So sorry to be a bit cryptic, but there are some really cool things that are going to be announced at NADA that we think are really going to help us, catapult to where we need to get to. We know that we have some areas that we need to improve, but between CRM, DMS, these two are like the big holy grails, right? And when listening to our dealers, they're like, whoever builds this and actually does the right job and joins these things together is going to win.
agreed.
That's a big thing that we're going to focus on, but it's a big undertaking, right? I think everybody, I'm sure throughout your experience, how
Mhm,
people use CRM from one dealership to another,
mhm.
it's probably pretty entertaining. So, um, we have some people who are like, all it's got to do is be able to tell me when a lead came in, and another one who's so sophisticated that has built some data lake of reports on top of it, right? So that contrast is really challenging, but I think that those are going to be the big focuses for us.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I'm in the CRM all the time and I've been saying it for well over a decade. I
Hmm.
just wish there would be a company that could integrate the two and it was one seamless tool.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. And anyways, mm, same thing with the service scheduler. It's shocking to me when I go into dealerships that, service is such a big part of the business, yet they don't use the CRM. But like
Yeah.
all the notes from the new car deal are in there, and we're welcoming this new customer to our dealership, and we're going to try to nurture this new relationship, but we don't even have anything on them. The
Yeah.
advisor should, if the gold is already in there, why can't you see the gold? Why are you blocking
Yeah.
that information that can make that guest experience pop? If I could just welcome them and be like, hey, congratulations on your new car. You are working with my boy Joe. Joe is telling me you guys got a new upgrade. You got the kids growing up, right? Yeah,
Boom.
just new baby in the house. I mean, okay, we
That
would
would
be
make it.
like soaring.
Yep. And
Yeah.
see, Jen, I think in my opinion, I think you need two things for that to happen, really. One, you got to have a connected platform, right? Because the data has got to
Yes.
be together.
That's what I'm saying.
So that's actually one of the biggest inhibitants is I think there's a lot of dealers that want to do that, but then the problem is you got to get company A, B, C, D, and E to all work with each other.
Yeah.
And that's a bag of worms all by itself. And then the other
Mhm.
one is too, I think like you said something which I think stood out to me is like, look, the energy that you just brought over, it's a like you are customer centric focused. And I think
Mhm.
one of the challenges in automotive, which I think is a challenge today and forward right now, is how do you usher in a completely different type of person that you might
Mhm.
have maybe hired for differently 10 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And I think so if you're looking for that customer centric vibe individual,
Mhm.
when I speak to dealers all throughout the country, they're like, it's very hard for me because when I put out an ad and I look for somebody that's customer centric, I get nothing because I know that when I end up like pulling them in, they just don't want to be in the dealership world, right? Or if I do finally pull them in, I have to show them some antiquated system that they just can't understand.
Agreed.
And so I think when you introduce technology,
Mhm.
um, it ushers in that energy that you just brought over, right? I would love, in my experience in retail automotive, that was where I saw the future. I was like, the more I can find people like this,
Mm.
the processes are going to fix themselves, right? If I do a
Mhm.
great job and I uphold the processes, that's where I was telling you somewhere someone's going to get a premium for this experience, right? Um, that's going
But
to
they
be a
need
big
to leverage that technology to be able to pull that
gotta
off.
leverage the technology. You're 100% right. So they're kind of intertwined. They're very well connected.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, I'll be excited to see the new unveiling
Yeah,
because I know you guys are working on some stuff. I mean, there's nothing I enjoy more than watching a company
yeah.
just defeat obstacles, push the limits,
Yep.
press each other internally to just find the solution, evolve. Things change so rapidly, it's like, but you keep pressing on and you just think, how do we do it better? How do we make everybody's lives easier? And it's been really great watching you guys grow, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I don't think you guys are going anywhere. It just gets better and better. So
No, we're gonna do it. And I'll tell you, I think one big myth with us is everybody thinks just
Mhm.
because we do see the fragmented ecosystem and we're trying to bring it together that we don't play nice with anybody else. We have a
They
tremendous
do
amount
say
of
that.
respect. Yeah, I know that that's a big one, right?
Mhm.
And we have a tremendous amount of respect for all the different partners in the space, right? And I think there's some really incredible companies, right, that are really doing the right thing. And at
Yes.
the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make sure that we create an environment where
Mhm.
the big thing is I know a lot of dealers probably listening to this is the famous who owns the data? What do I do with my
Mhm.
data? What can I do
Mhm.
with my data? And so that really stuck out to Jay too, very early on. He said, this is ridiculous, right? That it belongs to them. Let them
Yeah.
do what they wish. And, so I think that in the spirit of that, we're very excited about the partnerships. We have a robust partnership
Mm.
with all of our vendor integration programs. We have really robust ways where dealers can, exchange their data for whatever purposes. And at the
Mhm.
end of the day, if we don't do a good job in building maybe a service scheduler, right, and we're not doing what we're supposed to, then shame on us. I think the dealer should have choice and say,
Agreed.
I'm not happy with this. But I think to your point, we are absolutely relentless in the pursuit of building something better.
Mhm.
We are inspired by all the people in this industry. We appreciate the support from people like yourself because, at the end of the day, I think every dealer wants the same thing. They're trying to figure out how to build a more efficient business, right?
Exactly.
And
Yes, and with margins getting squeezed,
yeah,
it's like, how do we
that's
become
it.
more efficient? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's exactly it. So we're excited, and
Mm.
we hope we dispel this myth of like it's not it. But look, there are some scenarios, right, where I think you said it. You're like, hey, if somebody could figure out how to do the CRM and the DMS together, well, I think everybody would, right? But at the
Mhm.
same token, there are other products too that we consider that way. And so we play
Yes.
nice. We have no problems playing nice with anybody. We want to make sure that we're always upholding the spirit of the dealer. It should be that way. They are ultimately our customers, and we want to make sure that we're doing right by them. And so we'll be relentless in that. So doesn't mean
Well,
we're
I'm
going to
glad to
probably
hear
not
you say
stub our
that.
knees and yeah, and bump our elbows getting there, but our dealer body has been extremely patient with us and supportive of us. And that's really why we're here today. It's a group of dealers who've really taken that leap of faith.
Yes, and some great names out there. And congratulations. I just read the Asbury one.
Yeah. Asbury,
Yeah.
we're very excited about that. Just to kind of quote David Holt on that, he wanted to be one of the best guest experience automotive retailers in the country.
That's it.
And so you couldn't have picked a better partner, just like I told you that when we have dealers who are really guest-centric, experience-centric, they win, right? And I really believe that that's the future. So we're extremely excited about that partnership.
It's been the core foundation of everything I've ever done in the car business, and it's paid off for me. But I feel like we still got miles to go, and anyways, we're evolving. So thank you so much for your time. It's great to hear your insights, and great to get like a glimpse of behind the scenes what's going on over here, because a lot of people don't know. They just read stuff, but it's nice to hear somebody inside, share their story and share their insights and projections and where we're headed this next year. So thank you so much.
You got it, Jen. Thank you.
All right. If you like these episodes and my sales game techniques, you should snatch up our latest dealer education program I'm hosting. It's called Jen's Remote Classes, and it's a 1-hour, once-a-week class with me alongside other dealerships, all pursuing the same end game to achieve top 10% status in your dealership. For more info, hit me up. All my contact info's in the show notes. I want to hear from you. And follow Dealer Talk with Jen Suzuki right now to get notified when episodes like this one drop. This is Jen on the podcast Dealer Talk with Jen Suzuki. See ya!